The Warhammer rules can be a weird place sometimes. Let's talk about why the average guardsman's lasgun is currently looking stronger than the average Space Marine's bolter. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought it would be fun to make a video on the peculiar case of lasguns versus bolters, as at the moment it looks like genuinely one lasgun can outperform one bolter against the majority of targets, and that isn't even a per points thing either, it's literally comparing one gun to one gun. As anyone who knows pretty much any 40k lore would tell you, in general the bolter should be the better of the two weapons. The lasgun is the mass-produced small arm of the Imperial Guard, basically a laser weapon firing a beam of light at the enemy, and it's utilised as their weapon of choice because it's easily mass-produced, really quite reliable as there's very few moving parts to go wrong with the thing, and that makes it an excellent choice for reliably equipping large volumes of men with. There's supposedly thousands of guardsmen out there in the 41st millennium for every one Space Marine, and the Imperium saves the best war gear for the best of the best. As an obvious downside to this, they aren't supposed to be the strongest weapon out there in 40k. A lot of guardsmen are known to fondly refer to them as flashlights, joking that you're not going to get too much more damage output than you would out of a standard torch. Still though, they are effective enough to threaten light infantry quite well, severing limbs and even being able to take down harder targets if you hit at the joints of their armour, but still the potency of a lasgun isn't exactly famed within the 40k universe. The Emperor's chosen holy weapon for the Space Marines to march to war with, each one handcrafted by chapter servitors, and it fires out the enormous caliber bolts, which are basically armoured-tipped, mass-reactive little missiles, impacting on the target and aiming to explode within the target itself, giving them a decent amount of armour penetration and just being absolutely devastating to infantry. The recoil on them is so great that a lot of non-augmented humans will struggle to cope with them, and they're powerful enough to be threatening power armour and even damage light vehicles. I do remember this little excerpt from one of the previous 40k rulebooks showing how just one bolter takes quite so much maintenance and rights of administration for, showing that each one needs a vast amount of work going into it, and it isn't something that the Imperium can farm out to the rest of their soldiers if they wanted to. I think part of the standard bolter's problems came from the transition from 7th edition to 8th edition. In 7th edition, lasguns were strength 3 and AP dash, and bolters were strength 4 and AP 5, meaning that they could puncture things like flak armour without you getting a save. That's the way it had been for a good long while, and then Games Workshop updated to 8th edition with a bit of a radical rethink of their AP system, with modifying armour saves rather than flat out ignoring them. AP 5 and AP 6 suddenly became AP 0, and that did remove one advantage that the bolter had over the lasgun. Now it was just going to be the strength that made the difference. It also looked like Games Workshop wanted the new Primaris Space Marines bolt rifles to be superior to the bolt gun, and you don't really have all that many stats to alter on a basic weapon like this, so the bolt rifle got a bit of extra range and an extra pip of AP over the standard bolter, which felt a lot less dangerous by comparison. Then, as 8th and 9th edition have rolled out, Space Marines did get a couple of extra benefits to their standard troopers. They acquired a balance patch called Bolter Discipline, meaning that basically the Space Marines that are staying stationary can rapid fire their bolter out to 24 inches. It is a genuinely useful damage buff, though being stationary in 40k usually isn't ideal. Often you want to be either repositioning to get better cover, or moving towards objectives, or moving to get range or line of sight on something, so there's a lot of cases where you still have to move anyway. Marines also got combat doctrines in their 8th edition codex as well. That's the one where they get extra AP when they're in the tactical doctrine, but currently that only happens in 1 or 2 battle rounds out of the 5 that you have in a game. A lot of Space Marine chapters at the moment tend to want to rush through the tactical doctrine to get to the assault doctrine, as most bolter type variants just aren't really worth seeing as have the extra AP on for the majority of units, and a lot of Space Marine's most dangerous units are combat ones. Finally, and more recently, Guard got Hammer of the Emperor. Guard aren't really super strong at the moment, but previously they were ridiculously weak, and Hammer of the Emperor was one of Games Workshop's patches, giving them a whole army shooting buff. Every 6 to hit the enemy auto wounds them. It's pretty useful on just about every single weapon that the Guard has besides Flamers, but in particular there's pretty much no weapon that benefited more than the lasgun really. They'd often be very bad at wounding the enemy due to being only strength 3, so now they get an easy way to wound the toughest things just by hitting well. It actually gives them a massive boost to their damage against a lot of targets in the game. It has left us in the pretty weird situation though that Guard lasguns seem to be just directly better than Space Marine bolters if both of them are just rapid firing at the enemy, and we're assuming no combat doctrines for the Space Marines as they don't get them in most battle rounds. Say you've got a tactical marine squad of 10 marines with bolters, that'd cost you 180 points, rapid fire them and hit on 3s, and you'd kill something like 6 guardsmen, 1 space marine, about 4 orc boys, 1 or 2 wounds to toughness 7 vehicles, and just about 1 wound to a toughness 8 one. If we compare that to an Imperial Guard veteran squad, 70 points, and we'll just say that they all have lasguns for simplicity. I know in reality the sergeant would have something like a free plasma pistol, but this is just for a little bit of simple comparison. Again, the veteran squad hits on 3s, as we're trying to compare the power of the weapons here, not just the guys firing them. Out of those above targets listed, the only one that the bolters do better against are guardsmen, but the difference is absolutely minute. The veteran guardsmen do 5.6 dead guardsmen, whereas the Space Marine bolters do 5.9. They're the same against toughness 4 targets, and then they're various degrees of better against everything else. In particular, if you're targeting, say, orc boys, something that bolters have usually been quite good at when they were toughness 4, now they're toughness 5, the lasguns will actually do an extra 50% better against orcs, which really is pretty mad considering lasguns are supposed to be really quite ineffective and bolters are supposed to be super scary. Otherwise, neither of them are really all that efficient against vehicles, but guard lasguns certainly do better at toughness 7 or toughness 8 ones, a little bit better against toughness 7, which the bolters can still wound on 5s, but crazily better against toughness 8, where bolter damage is cut in half, but lasguns remain the same. It's just really weird that lasguns basically seem to be flat equal or better against everything besides toughness 3 targets, compared with the holy bolter. I would bear in mind that there's definitely other factors at play here. Bolters do have bolter discipline, which can be firing out to 24 inches, and they do have the chance for AP-1 if they do happen to be in combat doctrines. But if we are taking other external factors into the equation, then Guard would almost always be getting a platoon commander for a very cheap cost of 25 points, and that would allow you to flat double the rate of lasgun output, again getting you the 2 shots at 24-inch range or big 4 at 12 inches, and that's going to make the bolters look like a bit of a joke even in ideal circumstances, or if they were buffed by a captain. In terms of actual 40k game balance, it's not actually the worst thing in the world. Lasguns aren't really seen as a problem, Guard aren't super strong, and even within Guard lists, lasguns aren't something that you want to spam as much. Typically it tends to be things like Demolisher tank commanders these days. They definitely can be surprisingly bitey though, particularly in big Cadian conscript blobs. Likewise, Marines have plenty of other strong options in the Codex. Even tactical Marines can make appearances in competitive lists. They do tend to be just small 5-man squads, mainly for the durability on objectives though, maybe bringing along a heavy weapon like a grav cannon, and the bolters definitely aren't the main draw, just a little extra. The main value of the tactical Marines is more in their durability, and they do punch a fair bit better than guardsmen in melee. Still though, it does feel like one of those things from a lore perspective that just feels properly weird. A humble guardsman being able to put Space Marine firepower to shame against plenty of targets. I did touch on bolters being a bit underpowered in previous videos. There's a bunch of different ways that we could think about improving them, I guess. Maybe just gaining a bit of AP to equal them to Primaris bolt rifles I don't think would really hurt. Even given that as a free upgrade, I suspect would be a long way off bolters actually being spammed for damage. Otherwise, I guess you could think about improving anything from the characteristics of the range, damage, strength, or the number of shots of the weapon. I feel like standard bolters could use a bit of a buff. You only have to look at the Chaos Space Marine profile to see just how underpowered they are compared with chainswords. A standard Chaos Space Marine with a chainsword is going to be way more dangerous in combat than the equivalent shooting with a bolter. I believe it's usually 4 strength 4 AP-1 attacks versus 2 strength 4 AP-0. So anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is the fact that the standard lasgun outshoots the standard bolter a problem for 40k? And if so, what should Games Workshop do about it? If there's any other things between the lore and rules that don't stack up as well, feel free to let me know. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k stuff coming. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description. The channel's Patreon page is how I can afford to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early each week, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.